Hello, welcome back to Up the Villa. We have a special guest, Paul from Celtic Fan TV. How you doing, mate?
Good, look, very good. Apart from the storm that's happening up here today, I'm absolutely spot on. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, to be fair, it's quite windy where I am, to be fair. So, yeah, you must be buzzing with your sort of Champions League success that's happening at the minute. But we'll go back to the start first. We'll chat about a bit of, Celtic and their history and titles and European success. So just talk to us a little bit about Celtic.
Well, if you go back to the beginning, founded in 1888 by Brother Walfrid, set up as a charity really, to feed disadvantaged people, and the history has been a long and successful one. Obviously, we're the biggest club in Scotland. We've won 119 major honours. The most notable of which was obviously winning the European Cup in 1967. The Lisbon Lions, that team is known as, they were all born within a 30-mile radius of Glasgow, which was quite unique. They did it, I think they were before their time in terms of the style of football that they played. It was extremely attacking. We beat Inter Milan in the final, and that sort of story of the attacking football we played that season has sort of set the tone for the rest of the history of the club since then. There's always an expectation on Celtic not just to win, but to do it by playing attractive attacking football. So we've recently had huge domestic dominance over the last 10 years. We've won a remarkable amount of domestic trebles. We actually won 4 domestic trebles on the spin a few years back, which is unheard of, really, even during our history. And right now we're sitting pretty at the top of the league again, going for a 4th consecutive league title. We won the League Cup against Rangers in the final in December there, so we could be on course for another domestic treble, which would be lovely. But the big thing for us in terms of where Celtic sit now is trying to make progress in Europe. We've really struggled at Champions League level for a long time now. That's partly down to the changing nature of European football, and the resources that we have in Scotland, but numerous other factors as well. And I think this season it's been brilliant for us as supporters to see some progress in the Champions League, and the new format has definitely helped us. The draw certainly helped us, but a big thing for Celtic throughout their history has always been about European football and trying to make a mark and gain respect across the continent, particularly when we come from a small league like Scotland. So European football is huge for us, and the Champions League has finally bore some fruit this season.
Yeah, so just talk to me then about the Champions League, because you are a team that are consecutively in it, so you will know the old format compared to the new format. So why do you feel like you've been a little more successful during this campaign?
I think that the change of format has been good for a couple of different reasons for us. We have been used to the old format. We did go through a spell around 10 years ago where we went consecutive seasons missing out on Champions League football. In fact, just around the COVID shutdown, we missed a couple of seasons as well. So we have been in and out in the last decade, but the old format was obviously heavily relying on what pot you were in, because there was 4 pots. Celtic tend to be in pot 4. Maybe the odd time we'd be in pot 3, but pot 1 and 2 obviously have the big hitters, and you're playing home and away against them. And it's got to the stage where Celtic really struggled to compete. If you go back to early 2000s when Martin O'Neill was our manager, which is something we've got in common. Obviously, Martin O'Neill's team could really compete with the likes of Juventus and Barcelona and all those big teams. Like we had a really good home record at that time, and we could compete against them. But nowadays, it's just impossible. So the new format has allowed us, obviously, to face teams from our own pot, and face 2 from pot 3 and 2 from pot 4. It's two from each pot, and I think it's helped. Obviously, we got a kind draw. The home fixtures the home fixtures were favourable, certainly in the sequence of them, because we started against Slovan Bratislava, which let us get a nice win on the board. Then we had the three most difficult fixtures away to Dortmund, and we had Leipzig and Atalanta as well, which were probably the hardest games other than coming away to you guys, but that was the final match day. So I think the playing everybody once has helped us, and getting the opportunity to play teams from our own pot has definitely been a big factor for us this season.
Yeah, so you must be looking forward to the next phase of it. So how far do you think you can go in it?
I think it depends what happens next week, and it depends where we finish, and then who we face in the playoff, because obviously I think right now we would face Real Madrid or Bayern Munich. So
Oh my God.
it comes back to that. It comes back to that scenario I've just talked about, where we'd have next to no chance in that tie over 2 legs of beating a team like that. But again, if we get a point next week, if we somehow manage to sneak all 3, which I think would be extremely unlikely, we could move further up and maybe get a favourable draw where we think we can compete against someone over 2 legs. But I think the big marker for Celtic this season, for everybody, the manager said it, the supporters, everybody wanted to at least secure playoff qualification. That is a step forward for us. If we could get a kind draw in the playoff and get to the last 16, that would be amazing. But I think it'd be nothing short of a miracle for us to go any further than that.
So who have been your best players this season, and players that Villa need to watch out for?
Well, a big factor for us this season has been the wingers. Brendan Rodgers' teams, we're obviously used to Brendan Rodgers' teams from the first time that he was here. And the wingers are always huge contributors in terms of goals and assists. We've actually saw a bit of a decline in output from the centre forward, who has been Kyogo Furuhashi or Adamida. Those guys haven't been so prolific, but the wide players have been massive for us. So Nicholas Kuhn on the right-hand side, who we signed last January, is a German player. He came from Rapid Vienna. He's been at Leipzig and Ajax earlier in his career. He made a really, really poor start when he came in last January. And I think a lot of Celtic supporters had started to sort of write him off early doors, but he's really quick, brilliant dribbling ability. He's scored a lot of goals for us this season. I think he's in high teens for goals and assists, so he's probably been the standout player for us. And Daisen Maeda on the other side, Japanese forward who plays through the middle for Japan but plays on the left-hand side for us. He has been incredible. His work rate is amazing. The way that he closes down and presses the game is massive for us in Europe, but he got sent off on Wednesday night, so he won't be involved against you guys next week. Those 2 players have been massive. Callum McGregor, the captain in midfield, who sort of plays in the deep playmaker position in midfield, the 6, if you like, is a huge player for us. He was brilliant the other night, and again, we need when we play in Europe, we need him to step up and really lead the team. Other than that, Cameron Carter-Vickers, who you might know from his time at Spurs and Bournemouth, is a huge player for us in defence. We've just brought in Austin Trusty in the summer from Sheffield United to join him at centre half. But I think in terms of threats, it's the wide players, and we're missing Maeda. And then we've got a couple of guys in midfield, the likes of McGregor and Rio Hatate as well, who was brilliant against Young Boys the other night. He was excellent against Leipzig in the Champions League, but he just has an issue with consistency. But when he's on his day, he can be a really dangerous player as well for us.
So I'm going to mention 2 words. John McGinn. Talk to me about John McGinn then. How do you feel about McGinn?
Well, it's actually the stories sort of came full circle for John McGinn, because the first time Brendan Rodgers was here, we tried to sign John McGinn from Hibs, and it became a bit of a saga. We missed out on him because of friction between the Celtic board and the Hibs board, and at that time there was a lot of pressure on the Celtic board to get the transfers that Brendan Rodgers wanted done to push us to the next level, and they missed out on John McGinn. It became a really high profile failure for the club, and arguably one of the factors that led Brendan Rodgers to walk out the first time he was here. So to come full circle now, and obviously ended up going to Aston Villa, he's done amazing for you guys. He's obviously still a huge Celtic fan, but obviously he's the captain for you guys now, isn't he? And I think he's done amazing there. So it's going to be interesting to see him. He generally played very well against Celtic when he was a Hibs player, and even St Mirren before that. He really stood up and performed against Celtic, so it'll be interesting to see him next week.
Yeah, he has been injured, but he's back now in first team training, so he should feature against West Ham. And I imagine he's not missing this game at Villa Park. So, yeah, John McGinn, hopefully he's super on the night then. So I've got a question for you, and I find this one quite interesting. So if Celtic were in the Premier League, where would they be competing, in your opinion?
This is $1 million question, isn't it? I think given the resources and a bit of time, we would be certainly top half, certainly top 8, and possibly top 6. I think the thing that we talk about from our side of it is looking at the TV money that is in English football, and that you have the likes of not to single anybody out, but Bournemouth, Crystal Palace, these sorts of clubs who are guaranteed £100 million in revenue every year from broadcasting. That's our entire revenue, and our fan base, which is huge worldwide, given the sort of Irish diaspora, if you like, across the world. Celtic's got a huge appeal, but we're sort of just stuck in this small pond, which means we can't compete with the big teams in Europe. But I think given a couple of years with some Premier League money, we'd be right up there, I'd like to think.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. So it leads me on to like my next sort of point then. So as a Celtic fan, what sort of really gets you going? Because, you know, in the league, you are very, very dominant. So is it sort of the thought of Champions League football that really sort of gets you guys excited? Or are you happy like winning everything in Scotland?
I think you never get tired of winning. That's something that a lot of supporters of other clubs level at us in Scotland, like that we must be sick of it. We're not sick of it. We're certainly not sick. Certainly not sick of beating Rangers either, which is definitely the thing that we get up for, the thing that we enjoy the most, that because of the rivalry and how big it is. It's always brilliant to get one up on them and win league titles and win trophies against them. But I think as the years have gone by and we've sort of cemented this dominance domestically, that's why the attention has been more on European football and trying to get some sort of progress there. It's difficult because you only play in the old format 6 games, this format 8, and then if you can progress, maybe 10 or 12. So it's really difficult to sort of boil down the club's success or failure to such a small portion of the season. But it does get like that because we do have the most resources in Scotland, so there's a huge expectation on us to win. But when it comes to Europe, that is where we want to see the team compete against their counterparts who are maybe of a similar level or just a bit higher in different European leagues. And I suppose it gives us a sense that the club is still relevant in European football, where I think the Scottish game gets obviously a hard time, particularly in the rest of the UK and from around Europe. But European football can be the thing that lets us as fans say, do you know what, we can prove that we're a decent side and we're a big club.
Yeah, I love it. So have you been able to watch much of Villa, sort of keep an eye on our journey? I guess you must have a bit of see John McGinn, and obviously you have that sort of little bit of a connection with him as well, being Scottish and stuff. So what are your thoughts on Villa?
Yeah, I think you guys obviously had an incredible start in the Champions League. I think I can't believe, actually, looking at the table, that we are now a point behind you. After obviously our second match day, we got smashed by Dortmund, and you guys were flying at that time. I'm really impressed with Villa. I think Emery is top level manager. Really good at European football, obviously, as CV tells you, with how many Europa League titles that he's won. I think he was really let down at Arsenal. I think he should have probably had longer, and I think he's done amazing for you guys. I think he's got a lot of really good players. Obviously, John McGinn, who's the first one that springs to mind for us is Scots, but I really like Watkins. I really like Duran. Tielemans as well. I think there's lots of top players in your side. It was interesting though that you guys had that sort of run. Was it around October, November? Run in really bad form, but you seem to have picked it up again recently.
Yeah, we were having a bit of a disaster at the time, but we sort of leveled it off a little bit now. So I imagine the media are going to spin this as the Battle of Britain, because they've done it for the Spurs and Rangers, and they've done it for Man United and Rangers as well. So how do you think it's going to play out? What do you think is going to happen? What do you think the atmosphere is going to be like?
I hope the atmosphere is going to be incredible. I've never been to Villa Park. I've been lucky enough to be at all the games this season, all the away trips this season. So Dortmund was an incredible atmosphere, but tremendously forgettable for us because we get trounced 7-1. Atalanta was decent. Zagreb was a bit strange because you're so far away from the pitch and it's such an old ground. But really looking forward to seeing Villa Park. I hope the atmosphere is going to be incredible. I'm sure it will be. In terms of how the game's going to play out, as I said, Dies and Maeda is a huge miss for us. There was an element of thinking this game might be a dead rubber if we could secure qualification before we came to play you guys, because I said we got a kind draw, but to get you guys away from home out of pot 4 wasn't kind. And I think we didn't realise because how this new format's set up, there's still plenty of jeopardy in this game next week, because we could move 3, 4, 5, 6 positions depending on the result, and that obviously has a knock-on effect on who you face. I think it's going to be difficult for us. We have done since the Dortmund defeat. I mean, that's the only defeat we've had in the competition this season. We had 2 0-0 draws, one against Atalanta and one against Zagreb, and they were different because Atalanta are a top side, and we did really well to get out of there with a point. Zagreb was different because we were the better team and we had the best chances in the game. So we were sort of disappointed to come away from that game with only a point. But the away form has always been a struggle for Celtic in this competition. We've got a terrible record. I think we've only won 2 games away from home since the European Cup became the Champions League all those years ago. So it's going to be incredibly difficult for us. You guys are obviously still in with a good chance of the top 8 as well, so it's not a dead rubber for you. Again, we were thinking when the draw was made, if Villa are already through, then they might rest some players and they might take their eye off the ball a wee bit. But I think it will be a difficult game for us. But as I say, we've sort of rectified the away form a wee bit. So hopefully we can nick a point by hook or by crook.
Nice one. So I want to ask you just finally about sort of like Brendan Rodgers and how highly do you rate him, and what are your thoughts towards Postecoglou of how he's doing at Spurs, and who do you prefer out the two?
Good question. If I start with Postecoglou first, when he took over, was just after COVID, which was a disaster of a season for us. We were on for 10 in a row, which was the first time anybody had ever done that, and Rangers ended up winning the title, and we absolutely fell apart. So when Postecoglou came in, he inherited a mess. We lost a lot of key players, the whole spine of the team, and he had to rebuild it, and he did an incredible job. And the thing I will say about him is, when he's your manager, and I see this with Spurs now, you so want to believe in what he's doing, and because he's so uncompromising in his style of play and the approach, that has a galvanising effect on you. But I think watching it now at Spurs at a higher level, where the games week in and week out are a real test, and I know they've had huge injury problems this season, but I do think they could do with some tweaks here and there, because I've watched a few games involving Spurs this season, and it just looks like they're a bit naive at times. And I'm disappointed because I wanted them to do well. I don't think it's over for him yet, but he's obviously been struggling. Hopefully they can somehow navigate this second leg against Liverpool and make it to a League Cup final. I think that would buy him some time. But he was incredible. The style of football was incredible. But again, when it came to European football for us, we played like that. We played the way Spurs play in the Premier League just now in Europe against Real Madrid, which is impossible when you're Celtic. But he was incredible. Rodgers, I think Rodgers probably maybe just edges it. Again, maybe that's recency bias because he's currently our manager. He could be a wee bit more pragmatic, I suppose, than Postecoglou. I think the contrast and the difficulty domestically for us is that because we dominate the ball all the time, Rodgers' style of play is more considered and it's slower build up, and he likes to look after the ball. Whereas Postecoglou's was more all out attack, and domestically that was brilliant for us because it was more entertaining, it was faster paced. Whereas for Rodgers, sometimes, I mean, every day we play comes to Celtic Park and sits deep, sits behind the ball. And there's often domestic games that can become a bit monotonous because we're just recycling the ball between the centre halves and trying to work it down the side, coming back out, going down the other side. And sometimes people groan in the stadium about that. And Brendan Rodgers actually came out after a recent win and sort of had a go at the supporters, which is really controversial. And we didn't take too kindly to it because sometimes the style of play can be slow. And that game was 3 days after we lost at Ibrox. So he had to go at the fans and it didn't really sit too well. I think that's the problem for Brendan. He's come back to the club this time round, I think, to repair some of the damage that he did by leaving to go to Leicester, because he left in the middle of the night, basically, and we didn't think he was going to go. And I think he's got this sort of chip on his shoulder that he thinks less people have forgiven him than actually have. But he's incredible for us. I think he's probably the best manager that we could have. I don't think Celtic could attract a manager of a much higher calibre than Brendan Rodgers. So I think if you pushed me, and it's maybe just because he's our man right now, I would say just Rodgers.
To be fair, some of that's carrying my head while we're recording it. If you guys had have won 10 in a row, we probably wouldn't have had Steven Gerrard as our manager. So
That's right.
I'm blaming you guys for us having Gerrard, because it was an absolute disaster in the end.
That's right.
But no, it's been great chatting to you. Your knowledge on Celtic has been phenomenal. So yeah, it's been great chatting to you, and hopefully you enjoy your trip at Villa Park as well. So cheers, mate.
Brilliant. Thanks for having us, man.